So footnote 5, lovely footnote 5 in the prosecution's response to the defendant's motion to change venue. Let's take a look at it because it's causing a lot of people to say, oh, I knew it, the case was falling apart, they got nothing. So it says the probable cause affidavit did not explicitly state that the defendant was near the actual home of the victims, but stated the defendant was in the vicinity of a cell tower servicing the area of the victim's residence 12 times in the months before the homicides. And that footnote was in conjunction with this in the document. During the course of Dr. Edelman's survey, respondents were asked whether they had read, seen, or heard about a series of factual information items related to the case. Defendant's Exhibit B, Appendix B. The majority of those items, that cell tower data showed that the defendant was near the victim's home several times in the months before the murder. It got me looking at the PCA again because there was something I hadn't really noticed before in it, but there was also something else that has bothered me from the start that stuck out like a sore thumb that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. But let's go over part of the PCA and I'll show you the part that just stuck out to me now. Okay, so in the PCA, this is when they were talking about after they received that historical data from June 23rd to the current, which was as of the date the PCA was written. It said, after consulting with a cast SA, I was able to determine estimated locations for the 8458 phone from June 2022 to present, the time period authorized by the court. The records for the 8458 phone show the 8458 phone utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to the area of 1122 King Road on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. Now, notice they didn't say at the house. It just says coverage area of 1122 King. So that footnote is correct. Which, by the way, the water tower that's right over there near the King Road house is also a cellular resource. I'm not sure if a lot of people realize that, but it has a 5G network on it. Now, let's look at the next paragraph. One of these occasions, on August 21st, 2022, the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources providing coverage to the King Road residents from approximately 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. At approximately 11:37 p.m., Coburger was stopped by Latah County Sheriff's Deputy Corporal Duke, as mentioned above. The 8458 phone was utilizing cellular resources consistent with the location of the traffic stop during this time, Farm Road and Pullman Highway. Now, I never noticed this before. They broke this up into a way that sounds like it was utilizing two different resources, which would make sense. Because if he was over at Palouse and Fire Mall, which is where that Farm Road is, that would be a completely different cellular resource than over closer to the King Road home. So I think they put that in there specifically, saying the resource by Farm Road and then the resource by 1122. So even though they're just saying areas, they are inferring very strongly that he was over near the house first and then was over by the mall. That he wasn't utilizing the same resources that whole trip. So I think that's going to be interesting to find out in court where they had him pinging off of when he was at the mall and then prior to being at the mall. So yeah, that is something I hadn't noticed before the whole time I had read that. I read that and just assumed they were referring to the same cellular resources. But now that I look at it again, the way it's broken up is it's talking about the time frame. It actually has times prior to when the traffic stop was and saying it was utilizing the resources in the area of 1122 King. And then at the time of the traffic stop was using resources consistent with Farm Road. So, this is just my speculation, but going off what it's stating here, I'm not getting this stuff out in left field. I'm not trying to make something up out of thin air. Just reading what's on there, that sounds like he utilized 2 different resources. So I'd love to know which cell service he was pinging off of and how close it did put him to the house, and which service he was pinging off of at the mall as well. Now, I'm going to go through the next section about when he went down to Lewiston, because I think those were also included in the probable cause affidavit for a reason. So as we continue, it says at approximately 12:36 p.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to Kate's Cup of Joe coffee stand, located at 810 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage from the U.S. Chef store located at 820 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington, and adjacent to Kate's Cup of Joe showed a white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1 drive past Kate's Cup of Joe at a time consistent with the cellular data from the 8458 phone. At approximately 12:46 p.m., the 8458 phone then utilized cellular data in the area of the Albertsons grocery store at 400 Bridge Street in Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage obtained from the Albertsons showed Kohberger exit the white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1 at approximately 12:49 p.m. Interior surveillance cameras showed Kohberger walk through the store, purchase unknown items at the checkout, and leave at approximately 1:04 p.m. His possible path of travel is depicted below. Now, why was that information about the Albertsons and the coffee shop included in there? My belief, this is speculation again, but just from looking at this PCA, those are included in there to show the accuracy of the pings. Because they had the pings first from having that file on the 8458 phone, and it showed that he was there at near the Albertsons, there near the coffee shop, and the surveillance video backed that up. That is to show the accuracy. So that is to back up what they're saying when they are using those cell phone pings to place him in other locations. It's like, hey, we have the accuracy to prove it. Now you might say, well, they said on one of the times that it pinged in Moscow, but he really wasn't in Moscow. So how is that showing accuracy? Well, I believe that also is about accuracy. So let's read that section. Okay, it says investigators found that the 8458 phone did connect to a cell phone tower that provides service to Moscow on November 14th, 2022, but investigators do not believe the 8458 phone was in Moscow on that date. Notice what's different in that paragraph. In all the other parts of the PCA, they've been putting specific areas, like cellular services in the area of 1122 King Road, or in the vicinity of Kohberger's apartment, or cellular services in the area of the Albertsons. They didn't put that this time. It just says that provides services to Moscow. They used the city in general. So they didn't tell us specifically what area of the town that ping was in. And it also didn't say where he was. So they believe he wasn't in Moscow, but you notice they didn't say he was in Pullman or he was here or there. They know exactly where he pinged off of. And I believe they know exactly where he was for that ping. And by saying not in Moscow doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't nearby. He could have been out in the county. So he wasn't in the city limits. So no, he wasn't in Moscow. But that doesn't mean he wasn't nearby. Or he may not have even been near Moscow at all, but it doesn't mean he was in Pullman. For some reason, they're being very elusive on that one about where he was that day. And I also believe that's the day, and of course this is all hearsay, so you can't put too much stock into it, that some of his students were saying he did not show up for class on that Monday. So it'd be interesting to find out if it'll come out at trial where he was on that Monday. But they very much were vague this time. They only put tower that provides services to Moscow. Okay, which part of Moscow? Would love to know this. And where was he? Because you didn't put where he was. Now, the other part that has stood out to me like a sore thumb from the start, and I'm surprised more people haven't talked about it, is the next part of that sentence. And let's read it. Okay. The 8458 phone has not connected to any towers that provide service to Moscow since that date. Why? That's what I would like to know. Why? And why have so few people noticed that in the PCA? Because I've only seen a few other people bring it up. So if the defense is trying to say that he had a pattern of going over to Moscow, for instance, like maybe to go to Winco Foods because it's a 24-hour store, so those late night trips wouldn't seem odd. And he started going over there in late June and was pinging over there clear up until the date of the murders, so mid-November. That's an average of not quite 3 trips per month. So you could say, yeah, okay, there was a habit being established that he was going over there to go shopping. Or maybe he was going over there to visit a friend. But why all of a sudden, after the murders, did he never go back over to Moscow again? That's a big why. That sticks out to me. That's like an elephant in the room. Because if you're going to try to establish a pattern that he was over there in Moscow not doing any sort of surveillance, but was just over there for shopping, etc., then why did he interrupt his habit after the murders? There was still another month left of school after the murders. So you would think he'd have to go over to Winco to buy groceries if that was his normal habit, his normal pattern. Or if he had a friend over there he was visiting, etc. Why? Why? And I can't help but wonder if that is part of why Anne is so hot to try to find out how that warrant was obtained for the cell information. Because remember, they obtained the 48-hour file. And then later that same day, then they obtained his historical file from June on to the present. And she was questioning Payne big time, and Mallory too, about how that turnaround time was so quick on that warrant. Which is making me feel like she's wanting to get that warrant suppressed. But if that evidence was exculpatory, like how she's claiming that his cell phone records will show he wasn't anywhere near Moscow, that Cyree will show he wasn't there, if it's exculpatory, why would she be so hot on questioning how that warrant was obtained? My personal feeling, and I've had other people bring this up too, is that there's inculpatory information in that cell phone data, not exculpatory. And I feel like one of the inculpatory things is that he never pinged back there again after the murders. To me, that is huge. And I don't say that often. I'm not one of those ones going around going, bam, that's your bam, that's wow, that's huge. But to me, that has stuck out ever since the day that affidavit came out. Why is nobody saying how come he never went back to Moscow after the date of the murders? And then that brings in a whole new thing about surveillance versus stalking. And I plan on doing a video about that as well. Because, yes, there's no stalking. He wasn't arrested for stalking. But could those 12 pings be surveillance? Which is completely different than stalking. And he may even be blocks away from where the house was, but you can still see the house from other streets not in the neighborhood. So that's going to be an upcoming video about that. But I want to know what you guys think about, especially, why he didn't ping back there again after the murders. Let me know.